Mary huddled close to her younger brother Kit in the corner of their small cage. Their soft blue glow dimmed with fear as heavy footsteps echoed down the metal corridor of the merchant ship. The siblings' large, round eyes reflected the harsh artificial lighting from above, making them look like two scared owls in the darkness. The trading vessel Star Wanderer had been their prison for 3 cycles now. They were part of the cargo, though the traders preferred to call them living merchandise. Their species, naturally peaceful and gentle, had become prized possessions in the galactic black market for their ability to produce soothing bioluminescence and their natural talent for delicate technical work. Kit shivered as the footsteps grew louder. "Sister, they're coming again," he whispered, his voice barely audible. At 8 years old, he was still learning to control this glow, which now flickered erratically with his anxiety. Miri, 4 years older, wrapped her arms around him protectively. "Quiet now," she murmured. "Remember what I taught you. Dim your light. Stay still." The traders, tall gray-skinned beings with multiple arms and cruel eyes, passed by their cage, arguing in their harsh language. The children had learned enough to understand bits and pieces of their conversations. Dangerous cargo. Full-grown human. Worth triple the normal price. Military training. Myri's heart skipped a beat. A human. She had only heard stories about humans, and none of them were good. The traders spoke of them as violent, unpredictable creatures who had fought their way into galactic society through brute force and cunning. The children watched as more crew members rushed past their cage, carrying weapons and restraining equipment. Something big was happening on the loading deck. Through the gaps between passing legs, they caught glimpses of other cages lining the corridor. Most contained members of various species. Some they recognized, others they didn't. All were destined for sale in the outer rim markets where laws were loose and credits flowed freely. Hours passed. The ship's vibrations changed as it lifted off from whatever port they had stopped at. Kit had fallen into an uneasy sleep, but Miri stayed awake, listening. The usual sounds of the ship were different tonight. More guards patrolled the corridors. Orders were shouted more frequently. The air felt charged with tension. A loud crash from several corridors away made both children jump. Kit woke with a startled cry, his glow flaring bright blue before Miri could calm him down. Shay, she soothed, though her own heart was racing. More crashes followed, along with sounds of struggle and what might have been cursing in an unfamiliar language. "They're bringing it here," one guard said as he rushed past. "Double-check all cage locks." Minutes later, they heard it, the sound of something large being dragged. Multiple guards passed their cage, surrounding what appeared to be a massive figure wrapped in energy restraints. Though they could only see it for a moment, the sight burned itself into their memories. The human was easily twice the size of their largest guard. Its skin was tan, covered in strange markings, and its muscles bulged against the restraints. But what struck Miri most was its eyes. Dark, alert, and intelligent. Those eyes scanned the corridor as it was dragged past, and for a heart-stopping moment, they met hers. The human's gaze lingered on their cage for just a second, but Miri felt as if it had seen straight through to her soul. She pulled Kit even closer, trying to hide them both in the shadows. "What will they do with it?" Kit whispered once the procession had passed. "I don't know," Miri answered truthfully, "but stay away from that one. Humans are dangerous." The ship settled into its space flight rhythm, but sleep didn't come easily to either child that night. The knowledge that somewhere aboard this vessel, perhaps just a few corridors away, was one of the most feared species in known space, kept them awake and watchful. Little did they know that this fearsome creature would soon change their lives forever, and that their perception of humans, built on years of propaganda and frightening stories, was about to be completely transformed. But for now, they remained as they were, two small, glowing children huddled together in their cage, trying to stay as quiet and unnoticed as possible in a ship full of dangers. 3 days passed before Miri and Kit saw the human again. The ship's routine had changed. More guards patrolled the corridors, and feeding times became irregular. The siblings could sense the tension in their captors' movements, in their sharp voices and quick glances. On the fourth day, during what passed for morning aboard the Star Wanderer, 2 guards dragged the human past their cage. This time, there were fewer restraints. The human walked between them, head held high despite the visible bruises on its face. It wore simple prison clothes now, torn and dirty, but moved with a strange kind of dignity that caught Miri's attention. Kit pressed against the back of their cage, but Miri found herself moving forward slightly, curiosity temporarily overcoming fear. In the better lighting, she could see the human was male, with short dark hair and what appeared to be several days' worth of facial hair growth. His hands were bound, but his feet were free. As they passed the children's cage, the human's head turned slightly. Those dark eyes found them again. And this time, something unexpected happened. He winked. The gesture was so quick that Miri wasn't sure she'd seen it correctly. Kit tugged at her arm, trying to pull her back into their usual corner, but she remained where she was, watching until the human disappeared from view. "What's a human doing here?" Kit whispered. "They're not usually taken as slaves." Miri shook her head. "I don't know, but did you see how the guards were holding their weapons? They're scared of him." Later that day, they heard sounds of resistance from the direction where the human had been taken. Shouts, thuds, and then silence. The guards rushed past their cage, weapons drawn. Hours passed before they learned what happened. Through whispered conversations between passing guards, they pieced together the story. The human had broken his restraints during a routine check. He'd disabled 3 guards before being subdued. Now he was in solitary confinement, in one of the high-security cells at the end of their corridor. That night, as most of the ship's lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Miri heard something new singing. The voice was deep and quiet, barely carrying down the corridor, but the melody was unlike anything she'd ever heard. The words were in the human language, incomprehensible to her, but somehow soothing. "What is that?" Kit asked, his natural glow brightening with interest. "Shay," Miri whispered. "Listen." The singing continued, soft and low. Other prisoners stirred in their cages, some moving closer to their bars to hear better. Even the guard at the end of the corridor didn't interrupt, though he shifted uncomfortably at his post. The next morning, during feeding time, Miri noticed something different. When the food dispenser dropped their daily ration of nutrient paste, there was something extra, a small bright piece of fruit. She stared at it in disbelief. Fresh fruit was never given to slaves. Looking up, she caught sight of the human in his cell across the corridor. He was watching them, and when their eyes met, he made a subtle eating motion with his hand. Miri understood. Somehow, he had managed to sneak them his fruit ration. Kit reached for the fruit, but Miri stopped him. "Wait," she whispered. "It could be a trick." The human, seeing their hesitation, did something unexpected. He spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "It's safe. Eat." The words were in broken trader language, heavily accented but understandable. Miri watched as he mimed eating again, then smiled. A genuine smile that transformed his entire face from frightening to almost kind. Against her better judgment, Miri split the fruit with Kit. The taste was explosive, sweet and tangy, unlike their usual bland paste. Kit's eyes widened, and his glow brightened with pleasure. When they finished, Miri looked back at the human cell. He nodded once, then turned away as a guard approached. That night, as the singing started again, Miri found herself moving closer to the front of their cage. The human's voice carried stories in its melody. Stories she couldn't understand but could somehow feel. For the first time since their capture, she fell asleep not to the sound of Kit's frightened whimpers, but to the gentle rhythm of an alien lullaby. Perhaps, she thought as sleep took her, not all the stories about humans were true. Over the next week, a strange routine developed in the prison corridor of the Star Wanderer. The human, who the guards called Tom in their reports, began what looked like exercise routines in his cell. He would do push-ups, sit-ups, and various stretches, all while quietly speaking in his language. At first, Mary thought he was talking to himself. Then she realized he was teaching them. Chair, he would say clearly, sitting on his small bench. Table, touching the metal surface where his food appeared. Water, as he took a drink. Each word was repeated several times, always accompanied by the action or object it described. Kit caught on first. Chair, he whispered one day, pointing to their own small bench. Tom heard him and smiled, nodding encouragingly. The guards didn't notice this silent education. They were too focused on watching Tom's movements, always alert for signs of another escape attempt. But Tom seemed to have settled into a peaceful routine, giving them no reason for concern. Every few days, extra food would mysteriously appear with the children's rations, a piece of fruit, a portion of meat, or sometimes even a sweet. Tom never directly handed them anything, never made it obvious he was helping them. But his subtle nods told them everything they needed to know. One night, when the corridor was dimly lit and the guard had dozed off at his post, Tom spoke to them in the trader's language. "Your glow," he whispered. "Can you control it?" Mary nodded. "Yes," she whispered back. "Better than Kit." "Good. Very good. Show me." Dim, bright, dim again. Curious, Mary did as he asked, carefully modulating her natural bioluminescence. Kit watched, then tried to copy her, though his control was less precise. "Perfect," Tom said. "Remember this. Important later." Before they could ask what he meant, he began singing again, effectively ending the conversation before the guard woke up. Days passed, and the children's fear of the human disappeared entirely. They began to notice things about him. The way he watched the guards' patrol patterns, how he seemed to be memorizing the ship's schedule. Sometimes, they caught him mouthing numbers under his breath, counting something only he could see. One morning, Mary woke to find Tom staring intently at a small panel near his cell door. His expression was focused, calculating. When he noticed her watching, he switched to his exercises, but Mary had seen enough to understand. He was planning something. That day, during the meal distribution, Tom started coughing violently. Guards rushed to his cell, weapons ready. Through the commotion, he managed to lock eyes with Mary and made a subtle gesture toward the ceiling. Looking up, she noticed for the first time the small maintenance shaft above their cage. "Why did he show us that?" Kit asked later, when they were alone. "I think," Mary said slowly, "he's planning to help us escape." The idea should have frightened her, but instead, she felt a spark of hope for the first time since their capture. They'd seen enough to know that Tom was smart, strong, and careful. If anyone could break them out of this prison, it would be him. That night, Tom taught them a new word: freedom. He repeated it in both English and the trader's language, making sure they understood its meaning. The way he said it made it sound like more than just a word. It was a promise. As the days went on, their English vocabulary grew. They learned simple phrases: "Be quiet," "Stay close," "Follow me." Tom never explicitly said these would be useful for an escape, but the children understood. Every word was a tool, every lesson a preparation. One evening, as the ship's engines changed their pitch slightly, Tom's demeanor shifted. His exercises became more intense, his attention more focused. When he caught Mary watching, he held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the maintenance shaft again. 3 days. Something was going to happen in 3 days. That night, instead of his usual songs, Tom hummed a different tune. Something faster, more urgent. Mary felt her heart racing with anticipation. Next to her, Kit's glow pulsed with excitement he couldn't quite control. Their fear of humans had been replaced by something new: hope. Tom wasn't the monster they'd been told about. He was their chance at freedom. And soon, very soon, they would find out exactly what that meant. The Star Wanderer shuddered violently, throwing Mary and Kit against their cage bars. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the corridor as the ship's engines made an awful grinding noise before falling silent. Warning. Engine malfunction detected. Emergency stop initiated, the ship's computer announced in multiple languages. Guards rushed past, their usual orderly patrol replaced by panicked movement. Through the chaos, Mary caught Tom's eye. He was completely calm, a stark contrast to the mayhem around them. He gave them a slight nod before closing his eyes, appearing to sleep. Hours passed as the ship drifted in space. Repair crews worked frantically, their cursing echoing through the corridors. The guard shifts became irregular as more crew members were called to help with repairs. During the confusion, Tom began humming, not his usual songs, but a specific rhythm. 3 short notes, 2 long ones, repeated over and over. Miri realized he was timing something, counting the gaps between guard patrols. Near what felt like midnight, the emergency lights switched to backup power, dimming the corridor significantly. Only the soft blue glow from Miri and Kit's natural bioluminescence provided steady illumination. That's when Tom made his move. With movements too quick to follow, he produced something thin and metallic, perhaps saved from his meal rations, and began working on his cell lock. The children held their breath, watching as his large hands manipulated the tiny tool with surprising delicacy. A soft click, barely audible over the distant sound of repair work, and Tom's cell door swung open. He moved like a shadow, pressing himself against walls, freezing at the slightest sound. When he reached their cage, his face was intense but calm. "Ready?" he whispered in English, the word they'd practiced so many times. Miri nodded, pulling Kit close. Tom worked on their lock, his movements swift and precise. Another click, and their door too swung open. "Remember," Tom whispered in broken trader language. "You glow. Control it. Dim now." The children concentrated, reducing their bioluminescence until they were barely visible. Tom nodded approvingly. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from around the corner. Tom pressed the children gently against the wall, shielding them with his body. A guard walked past, distracted by a handheld device, never looking their way. After the guard disappeared, Tom lifted Kit easily with one arm and took Miri's hand with his free hand. His skin felt warm and rough, but his grip was gentle. They moved through the ship like ghosts. Tom seemed to know exactly where to hide when crews passed by, which corridors to avoid, when to move and when to freeze. The children's small size proved advantageous. They could squeeze into maintenance spaces that would have been tight even for the regular crew. Their first real test came at a security checkpoint. Tom set Kit down and pointed to a small vent above them. "Remember maintenance shaft," he whispered. "Your size. Perfect. I make noise there." He pointed down the corridor. "You crawl through, open from other side." Miri understood. She helped Kit into the vent first, then followed. The shaft was tight but navigable. They could hear Tom below, moving away. Then a loud crash from somewhere distant. Guards shouted and ran toward the noise, leaving their post unmanned. Working quickly, Mary found the vent exit and helped Kit shimmy down. Together, they found the door controls exactly where Tom had said they would be. A minute later, Tom slipped through the checkpoint, slightly out of breath but grinning. He had a guard's weapon now, though the children hadn't heard any fighting. "Good," he said, ruffling their hair gently. "Very good." Halfway there, they were approaching the ship's shuttle bay when alarms began blaring. Their escape had been discovered. Tom's expression hardened. He lifted both children this time, one in each arm. "Close eyes," he told them firmly. "No matter what, keep them closed. Trust me." Miri buried her face in his shoulder, feeling his muscles tense as he began to run. She could hear shouts, running feet, the sound of weapons being charged. Then Tom's voice, strong and sure. "Hold tight." Whatever came next, Miri realized, would determine everything. Their chance at freedom had come. Now they just had to survive long enough to take it. Tom sprinted down the corridor, with the children clinging to him, their small forms pressed tightly against his chest. The first energy blast sizzled past his head, leaving a scorch mark on the wall. Despite their fear, both Miri and Kit remained perfectly still, their eyes squeezed shut as instructed. "Stop right there," a guard shouted in the trader's language. Instead of stopping, Tom dove sideways into a maintenance alcove. In one fluid motion, he set the children down behind some pipes and spun around, firing the stolen weapon with precise bursts. The guard's shouts turned to cries of pain. "Look at me," Tom said quickly to the children. "Remember ship words we practiced?" Miri nodded. They had spent days learning words like shuttle, door, control, and emergency. "Good. When I say run, you run. Follow signs to shuttle bay. Remember picture I showed with hands?" Both children nodded again. Tom had mimed the shuttle bay layout countless times during their lessons. More guards were approaching. Tom checked his weapon's charge, half depleted. His face showed no fear, only concentration. "Ready," he whispered. A barrage of energy blasts lit up the corridor. Tom returned fire, then shouted, "Run." Miri grabbed Kit's hand, and they sprinted as they'd never sprinted before. Their small size became an advantage. Energy blasts passed harmlessly overhead as they ran beneath the line of fire. Behind them, they could hear Tom providing cover, his weapon's distinctive sound drowning out the guards' shots. They reached a junction. Miri's eyes darted around, finding the shuttle bay symbol they'd practiced recognizing. Left corridor. This way. She pulled Kit along. An alarm blared. Warning. Unauthorized access to priority sectors. Security protocols engaged. Heavy doors began closing throughout the ship. Tom's voice rang out behind them. Faster. They ran faster. The shuttle bay doors were starting to close when they reached them. Miri and Kit's small frames slipped through easily, but Tom. They turned back, hearts pounding. The gap was now barely wide enough for a person. Tom came charging down the corridor, guards in pursuit. He dove, rolling through the narrowing gap just as it sealed shut. The sound of energy blasts impacting the other side of the door echoed through the bay. "Good running," Tom gasped, quickly getting to his feet. "Now hide." The shuttle bay was massive, filled with various small ships and cargo vessels. The children darted behind a stack of crates as Tom worked on a control panel, his fingers flying over the interface. "Warning. Shuttle bay decompression in 30 seconds, the computer announced. Guards were trying to override the door. Tom ran to a nearby shuttle, quickly bypassing its security with practiced ease. The entry ramp lowered. "Now," he called to the children. "Quick." Miri and Kit ran for the shuttle. Just as they reached it, the bay doors behind them exploded inward. Guards poured through the breach, weapons raised. Tom pushed the children inside the shuttle, shielding them with his body as energy blasts filled the air. One caught him in the shoulder, but he barely flinched. "Strap in," he ordered, diving for the pilot's seat. The children fumbled with the harnesses as Tom's hands flew over the controls. The shuttle's engines roared to life. "Bay decompression in 5, 4, the computer continued. The guards were getting closer. 3, 2. Tom slammed a button. The shuttle bay's massive outer doors started opening. 1. The vacuum of space did the rest. Everything not bolted down went flying toward the opening, including the guards. Their shuttle, already powered up, remained in place as Tom expertly maneuvered it toward the exit. "Hold tight," he said, punching the throttle. They shot out of the bay just as emergency shields snapped into place behind them. Through the shuttle's viewport, they could see the Star Wanderer growing smaller. But they weren't safe yet. The ship's defense turrets were turning toward them, and in the distance, pursuit vehicles were launching. Tom's face showed grim determination as he gripped the controls. "Now," he said, "comes the hard part." Miri and Kit exchanged glances, their glow pulsing with a mixture of fear and excitement. They were free from their cage, but their journey was far from over. "See those lights?" Tom pointed at the shuttle's control panel while expertly maneuvering away from another energy blast. "Red means danger, yellow means warning, green means good." Despite their situation, he was still teaching. Mary and Kit watched intently from their seats as the shuttle swerved and dove through space. 3 pursuit vehicles chased them, their weapons creating deadly light shows in the void. The Star Wanderer itself grew smaller behind them, but its long-range turrets still posed a threat. "Kit," Tom called out, "your glow, can you make it very bright?" Kit looked uncertain, but Mary nodded encouragingly. The young alien concentrated, and suddenly his natural bioluminescence flared like a small sun. "Perfect." Tom grinned, banking the shuttle hard to port. "Now dim. Bright again. Dim." Kit followed the instructions, not understanding why until he saw one of the pursuit ships veer off course, its sensors apparently confused by the irregular light patterns. "Your turn, Mary," Tom said as he piloted them toward a dense asteroid field. Same thing, but opposite timing to Kit. The children worked together, their glows alternating bright and dim. The random patterns played havoc with the pursuing ship's targeting systems, causing their shots to go wide. A warning light flashed yellow on the console. "Shields at 60%, Tom muttered. "Need to lose them fast." He steered them into the asteroid field, weaving between massive rocks with incredible precision. The pursuing ships followed, but more cautiously. "Watch this," Tom said, his hands dancing over the controls. "Remember these sequences. Might need you to help pilot someday." The children paid close attention as Tom demonstrated basic flight maneuvers. Between dodging asteroids and energy blasts, he was still managing to teach them survival skills. Suddenly, a massive asteroid loomed before them. Instead of going around it, Tom aimed straight for a narrow crack in its surface. "Trust me," he said, noting their fearful expressions. The shuttle barely fit through the crack, scraping its sides as they entered a winding tunnel through the asteroid's core. Their pursuers hesitated at the entrance. Their ships were slightly larger. Tom switched off most of the shuttle's systems, letting momentum carry them through the darkness. Only the soft blue glow from Miri and Kit provided any light. "Count to 100, Tom whispered. "Like we practiced." They counted quietly in English, something else he taught them during those long days in their cages. When they reached 100, Tom powered up the engines and took them out through another crack on the far side of the asteroid. The pursuit ships had split up, trying to guess where they'd emerge. Tom used their confusion to slip away, keeping close to other asteroids for cover. But the Star Wanderer had anticipated their route. A massive energy blast from the ship's main cannon lit up space ahead of them. "Hold on," Tom called out, throwing the shuttle into a spiral. The children's glow flickered with fear as artificial gravity struggled to compensate. An idea struck Miri. "Kit," she said quickly, "remember the pulse game. Like in the cage." Kit nodded. Together, they created a rhythmic pattern with their bioluminescence, similar to how they used to pass time in their prison. The pulsing light reflected off nearby asteroids, creating multiple glowing targets. The Star Wanderer's next blast missed them completely, hitting a reflected light instead. "Brilliant," Tom exclaimed, understanding their strategy. He used the confusion to dive beneath the asteroid field, while their pursuers chased phantom reflections above. For tense minutes, they traveled in near silence, running dark except for the children's carefully controlled glow. When they finally emerged from the asteroid field, the Star Wanderer was barely visible in the distance. A new light appeared on the console, green this time. "That," Tom said with obvious relief, "means we're picking up a human distress beacon. Commercial shipping lane. Safe territory." The children felt the tension in their bodies slowly release. Their glow settled into a calm, steady light. "You did amazing," Tom told them, finally allowing himself to relax slightly in his chair. "Both of you. Your light patterns saved us." Miri and Kit beamed with pride. What they had once thought of as just pretty lights had helped win their freedom. The shuttle cruised smoothly now, heading toward the safety of human space. Behind them, the asteroids sparkled with reflected starlight, hiding their trail from anyone who might follow. 3 days after their escape, their shuttle docked at the human outpost New Hope Station. The massive space station gleamed like a silver star, its rotating rings providing artificial gravity to thousands of inhabitants from various species. As the airlock cycled, Mary and Kit stood close to Tom, their small hands gripping his. Despite their escape, this new world of humans terrified them almost as much as their previous captivity. "Everyone here is safe," Tom assured them, his voice gentle. "Look." Through the airlock windows, they could see a greeting party waiting. Unlike the rough guards they were used to, these humans wore crisp uniforms and warm smiles. Among them was a female human with a medical insignia. The airlock opened. The children instinctively dimmed their glow, but Tom squeezed their hands reassuringly. "Welcome to New Hope," the medical officer said, kneeling to their level. "I'm Dr. Anna. We've prepared a special room for you with adjustable lighting." To the children's surprise, she spoke these words in their native language, though with an accent. Their glow brightened slightly with hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new experiences. The medical bay became their temporary home, its lights dimmed to match their natural bioluminescence. Dr. Anna and her team treated them with gentle care, helping them recover from their ordeal. Tom visited every day, continuing their English lessons, and now teaching them about human culture. He brought them their first real Earth foods, something called ice cream, that made Kit's glow pulse with delight, and chocolate that Mary decided was better than any trader's fruit. One morning, Tom arrived wearing a formal uniform decorated with medals. "Time for the hearing," he said. The station's legal proceedings were different from anything the children had experienced. Instead of being treated as property, they were asked questions, their opinions valued. Tom stood beside them, explaining legal terms they didn't understand. By the authority of the Human Alliance, the chief administrator finally announced, refugee status is granted. Furthermore, given the circumstances and cultural recommendations, guardianship is awarded to Lieutenant Thomas Walker. Tom knelt beside them, eyes suspiciously wet. "That means I can be your family now," he explained, "if you want." Their combined glow lit up the entire chamber. 6 months later, Mary and Kit stood at the observation deck of their new home, a small station apartment adapted for their species' needs. The walls could turn transparent, letting them see the stars, or opaque when they wanted privacy. Their room was filled with things they'd never dreamed of owning. Books in multiple languages, comfortable beds that responded to their bioluminescence, and toys that Tom called educational materials. "Time for school," Mary called to Kit, who was practicing his English letters. They no longer needed to hide their glow. The station's school had a special program for refugee children, with teachers trained to understand different species' needs. Kit's natural talent for mathematics had emerged, while Miri discovered she had a gift for languages. Tom, now officially their guardian, had taken a teaching position at the station's security academy. Sometimes, when he thought they weren't looking, they caught him watching them with fierce pride. "Remember the first time we saw him?" Kit asked one evening as they watched ships dock at the station. "I was so scared," Miri admitted. "I thought humans were monsters." "And now?" She smiled, her glow warm and steady. "Now I know better. Some humans are heroes." They heard Tom's key in the door. He was home from work. Once that sound would have made them hide. Now they ran to greet him, their combined glow creating patterns of joy on the walls. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, producing a bag of their favorite Earth foods mixed with traditional dishes from their homeworld. Then maybe some stargazing. Later, as they sat together watching the endless field of stars, Miri realized something. Their glow no longer dimmed with fear. Instead, it pulsed with something new, belonging. They were no longer cargo, no longer slaves. They were children, students, family. They were free. And somewhere out there, they knew other slaves waited for rescue. But now, thanks to people like Tom, there was hope. Because humans, they had learned, could be the most terrifying creatures in the galaxy, not to the innocent, but to those who would harm them. That night, their glow shone brighter than ever before, a beacon of freedom in the darkness of space.